Bachman's Basement is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show.
Welcome back to Bachman's Basement, the place where we crack open the dusty crates of Stephen King's mind, and sometimes the first spark that lit the whole thing. Down here, we don't just revisit stories. We sit with them. We let them settle. We trace the pressure points, the grief that lingers for decades, the rooms that turn your own thoughts against you, the revenge that hardens slowly and waits for its moment, the child who can see that no one else can and has to grow up because of it. Tonight, we're not talking about a haunted room or a man making a deal with the devil. We're not following a calculated act of vengeance measured out over the years. Tonight is smaller than that. A locker room, a prayer closet, a gymnasium decorated for prom. Carrie isn't sprawling. It isn't mythological. It's pressure, social, religious, personal, the kind that builds quietly in a house where mirrors are covered and shame is taught like scripture. I'm your host, Christopher Ray Patton, and as always, I'm here with my co-host, Chris Clawson. Chris, how are you doing, buddy? What you been up to? What you been watching? How's the family? All that good jazz.
I'm doing good. Yeah, it's been a pretty cool week, I guess. I don't know. We're finally getting that winter weather over here, getting some snow. As far as what I've been watching, we went and saw that. Trying to think, we were planning to go see 2 films and we ended up only seeing 1, but Send Help. We went and saw that one in the theater, Cassie and I really enjoyed it. That one is new Sam Raimi flick. It's fantastic. Like, it hits all the beats of what you want from a Sam Raimi movie, where, you have it's just that insane sort of like, I don't even know how to describe what makes Sam Raimi's film so memorable when he hits, but this one is definitely one of those ones. So have you had a chance to see that one yet?
I have not. And actually, I don't know anything about it other than Sam Raimi directed it. So
without saying a whole lot about it, but the setup for it, if you watch the trailer for it, is basically this woman who's sort of a mousy woman, works in a corporate office in accounting, and she's constantly being sort of bullied or pushed aside from the corporate leadership. And she's been working really hard and doing, all the things that, as far as the work goes, to try to make that next step up in the ladder. But she's just not, cut out for that sort of world, so to speak, and it's not going to happen for her. But they know that the corporate people know that she's valuable to the degree that she knows how to do the job, and then basically they're going to try to get her to train this guy that they want and then cut her loose. So they're like, let's bring her along on this corporate retreat thing, and they end up on a plane that ends up going down, and then it's her and the boss, who's just a real piece of work, and they're trapped on this island together. And she's, from that point on, far more capable, and she just gets so the movie starts with her just being sort of like it's amazing that Hollywood can make pretty people look even more pretty, but they did it in reverse, where they made Rachel McAdams look homely. And then the movie, she just gets hotter and hotter throughout the rest of the movie as she's surviving on the island. And it's
the major plot point of McAdams slowly losing more and more clothing as the island progresses.
Right. But I mean, even her character is sort of like one of those women that doesn't wear makeup, doesn't do her hair, wears real just sort of old lady clothes. and just has like a poor self-image, and you learn a little more about her as the story goes along. And it's one of those movies that subverts your expectations in ways, and I don't want to say too much more. Don't want to ruin unintentionally ruined the story in ways for a couple of the theater employees who hadn't seen it and were coming out, and we were talking with somebody outside the theater, and then I just like a dumb guy that I am. I just like blew the ending for them. So I'm not going to do that for anyone that's listening here. So
I dare you.
I'm going to pass. But otherwise, the rest of the week, it's man, birthdays and then the Valentine's Day holiday and lots of work. I did download Red Dead 2, and I very, very just started it just a little bit. I'm not even out of the snow yet. So,
oh man, you have such a good time ahead of you once you get out of the snow.
Right. I was going to say, I looked at my save file, which I overwrote, by the way, because I'm like, I'm not going to jump into. I was a third of the way through the game, but now that's I was like, I don't want to jump back in where I left off because that was like, who knows, 2 or 3 years ago.
And so I think on my current save, because I restarted it not that long ago, I'm at the second camp. So once you hit the second camp, we can play together, and we'll have more to talk about within the story of that game, because otherwise I'm drawing from memory.
Right. Well, that's why I wanted to start over, because I remember I just wanted to get all the richness of the world, because I mean Rockstar just really does knock it out of the park when it comes to just not just the visuals, but the just sort of the details of the world, and you really feel it's immersive. And I wanted to revisit all of that. If I'm going to play Red Dead 2, I'm not just going to jump back in a third of the way through the story and play through the rest of it. I'm going to start again from the beginning.
Yeah, and what if you decide you want to play as an evil outlaw this time instead of a goodie?
Yeah, right? I don't know. I'm gonna just sort of let it come as as I go.
Yeah, for me on my end, I watched last night. Actually, watched it last night. The Perfect Neighbor, which is that Netflix release, and the whole movie is basically the whole movie is body cam footage of a stand your ground shooting, or what was what the defense was attempting to prove in the situation. But it's about a mother and her kids and this crazy white lady that lives across from them that keeps calling the police on the children.
I've seen that film. Yeah,
it's a watch. It's kind of a deeply disturbing watch, because you're seeing real life unfold in front of you, and there's kind of no pulled punches.
Racism.
Racism, but also things like the shooting itself to a large part, like the actual body and stuff like that, as they're getting loaded into the ambulance. So it's kind of it's not one that I would recommend for everyone if you're really sensitive to I would say true crime, but this is not even real true crime. It's like a more aggressive version of Cops. So if you're sensitive to that kind of thing, I wouldn't recommend it, but it is very interesting. I think it's the first time I've seen something like that put together, because it's not just the one call in body cam footage. It's like every one of the calls that the person had made previously, yelling about these kids being kids, basically. And the movie takes a really dark turn, which it did in real life as well, because it's based on true story. I know it's going to be up for, I think it's already been announced it's going to be up for best documentary. It's worth a watch if you're into that kind of thing. I wouldn't, like I said, if you're sensitive to that kind of stuff, or just tired of the world around you sucking, it's probably not the best thing to watch.
Yeah, I mean, especially with these sort of politically motivated shootings and things that have been going on in the country. The story, although it's not in any way politically sort of charged at all, it's certainly a very poignant look at America Even though it's just one sort of psychotic individual.
Yeah, and it also, I mean, it does get a little political at the end from the simple standpoint that it talks about the ridiculousness of the stand your ground law and how many more attempts people have used that as a defense, and how it's mostly by white people trying to use that as a defense. And in the story, it's not really a spoiler because it's based on a true story. Part of it is they investigate her computer to see how many times she had searched like stand your ground and try like, because it basically ends up being a setup shooting.
Like she was doing it on purpose. Yeah. I mean, that's, it seems very likely that was the case. She claims that not at all, but it was like these searches were before the shooting, so it's like, she feared for her life, but it does not appear to be that at all.
If you're more looking at something happy to do or listen to, Tom and I did 6M, his podcast, Tom Clark, had the podfather of Boink Studios, so to speak, about Princess Bride. So we did watch long talk about Princess Bride. It's great. Go check that out. That's a much happier tale. And coming up is RoboCop 3. It's our RoboCop 2 was so bad. So I hope people tune in for RoboCop 3 because I know it's even worse. There will be a lot of beer consumed by me doing that this weekend. But yeah, outside of that, man, I played a lot of games, got a new PC. You and I got to play some Overwatch together. I went on an absolute tear as Reinhardt. It was brilliant. It was like I had never missed a day in the gym in my life. It was pretty incredible. Couple plays of the game. Don't normally see that many of those with Reinhardt anymore, from what I know. But outside of that, I played. Speaking of Rockstar games, I got everything set up. My new desk, backdrop. There's some new interesting things coming to the Patton report. More long form playthroughs and things of that nature. But right now, I'm up to chapter 4 on the Warriors, and I've been recording all of that gameplay. So, for those who don't know, the Warriors was a game released on PlayStation 2. Based on the movie The Warriors by Rockstar Games that has a little bit of a prequel to the movie, as well as some aftermath for when they make it back to Coney Island. It's a great game.
Yeah.
And what else? There's something else I played. I talked about Overwatch.
I've
Vane, which is kind of cool. It's it'd be a lot more fun with more people. It's definitely just a zombie survival game, kind of like 7 Days to Die, or was it 7 Days? I'm trying to remember the names of the game, or DayZ. It's kind of similar to those. You get dropped off, you kind of set your character traits, and then you build and do survival stuff in a zombie apocalypse world. It seemed neat.
Yeah.
But no big review on that one. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, like, Red Dead's going to be one of those that I'm going to continue to play, chug along on, but I'm also finishing Avatar as well. So I'm playing through that as well, kind of concurrently. So I'm still playing Avatar, I guess.
Oh, yeah. I forgot you were playing that. So you're a pretty good ways into that at this point, right?
Yeah, I'm making progress. I've discovered another area that's like the high plains. It's super windy and whole nother tribe, and kind of realized that I'm starting to get a little bit of too far ahead as far as like the missions, where my level and the challenges of the missions, I'm like, I need to go back to the other area and like level up some more before going back over there. So that's one of those, like, I shouldn't rush through that game is what I'm realizing, because I mean there's a lot. It's just sort of like a world that's meant to just be lived in, and you're sort of supposed to. I don't know, I never played the Far Cry games, but a lot of people compare it to that. And I know we've talked about this before on the podcast, but that the nature of this game is like foraging, hunting, finding plants and and fruits, and then hunting animals and things like that, as well as saving the planet from the RDA.
Yeah, you kind of got two games that have a lot of that in common that you're playing through right now.
Right? They're both massive. So I figured that's not that bad actually though, because I can like sit down, play for an hour or two on one day, and then the next day, do the other game for a little bit and sort of like that. And then I'll, eventually I'll finish one of them and then I can just focus on one of them.
Yeah, I didn't get as much gaming done as I wanted to. I spent a lot of time downloading, like getting Xbox Live or Xbox Game Pass set up on PC and getting BattleNet set up on PC, which I ended up not even using because it wouldn't let you connect, and that was a whole nother fucking thing with Overwatch. I'm not going to bury them here on the podcast, but that was really annoying. And then setting up all of the various emulators. The other game I've been playing through is Knights of the Old Republic. I played that game a bazillion times. I still love it. I am recording some of that as well, so that'll be coming to the Patton report. That's a very long game, especially if you're recording it, because the aliens take forever to talk. I forgot about that, which is fine if you're playing it by yourself, because you can kind of just read the dialogue and click through with X. But if you're trying to give the full experience of what that game is like to play through all the way through the first time, which I've been doing, it can be kind of slow. So I just left Terrace for any Knights of the Old Republic fans out there, and got the Ebon Hawk, and that's kind of where I've left. Which Terrace is the first big area in the game. So the game kind of opens up from there. You've got not all of your party, but a good amount of your party. You get a couple of Jedis later on as you explore what type of Jedi you're going to be, because you have to go and do your Republic Jedi training or your light side training, and then you do dark side training, and then the game kind of spins off from there. But it's still great. I love it. It's so much fun.
And then you're going to play it again when the remaster eventually comes along.
I will play it again. And maybe this time I will actually play as a dark side user, because I never end up doing it. I never do. I always get there and the choices are just like, I'm not going to do that. But yes, we will see. If it ever comes out, man, my faith in that game coming out as a remaster, that's been dwindling for a long, long time. It's probably, we're going to get Grand Theft Auto 6 before we get that remaster.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like this day and age in the world that there's so much information that's shared with the public, as far as if we're talking about movies or video games or really any sort of creative endeavor, where we know that something's in production years in advance, some level of production. And so it creates this sort of untenable sort of ache to want to have it, and I almost feel like it'd be better if we could just if they could just keep it a secret somehow until they're a lot closer to finishing these things.
Yeah, I agree with that. But with the remasters though, it seems like you should be able to turn those out a little quicker.
Yeah, I mean they're not building a game, they're remastering the game. Yeah, so
but I guess it seems like they're rebuilding this entire thing, and it's went through multiple dev studios, and who knows what it's going to end up being.
Yeah, I think this year is going to be really good for movies and games. I think it's going to be a really big year. So,
in theory, we're getting Grand Theft Auto 6, which is going to be the biggest release in the past 10 years. So
probably, yeah, the most. If I don't personally judge a product based on how much money it makes, but that game's going to make more money than probably any other, not just game, but almost any sort of creative thing that's ever been put out in the world.
Yeah, if you compare it to the first one, or the Grand Theft Auto 5, if you're doing that comparison, how much money that game made, even before the online stuff. It's gonna be crazy. But the game itself's also great. So that's the thing about Rockstar. It's gonna deliver. I have a good feeling that it's going to be really great, and then everyone will forget how long it took to get here, just like we always do with every Rockstar project.
Yeah, very true.
Any other cool things happening? Or are you ready to hop into this?
Well, I learned that a new Foo Fighters record is coming this year, so I'm excited for that. They're doing a teaser on their website, so I'm like hoping that that's coming sooner rather than later in the year. I can't imagine they tease. They have like little 10-second clips from each of the songs that are sort of just like obviously not the beginning of the song, somewhere in the middle. And you can click on these, it's like a kid's bedroom guitar and posters on the wall and stuff on the website. So I'm excited. Maybe that shows my age, but that
So they fired their bass player not that long ago, right?
was
So
it. No, they had they had been working with Josh Freese, who's like a renowned drummer in
that's
the
what it
industry.
was.
But he's like, I mean, I don't think it had anything to do with because he's played with them before, and fantastic, and like they killed it with him. And I mean, he really knows how to play the parts. He has the energy and everything. But I think, and even he doesn't know because he even said it online. He's like, came out of nowhere. And at the same time, he's like, I feel like I'm where I belong now. Back, sort of like he's playing drums for Nine Inch Nails, and the Nine Inch Nails drummer is now the drummer for the Foo Fighters. So
They did the old Metallica Ozzy trade.
little switcheroo. So
You get Newstead and we get Roman Reigns. I mean,
yeah,
Rob Trujillo, sorry.
yeah, exactly. So honestly, it's like more power to them. Maybe they didn't do it the right way as far as like they could have been a little more transparent with Josh in the process to let him go. Instead of just like out of nowhere send him an email that says, "Sorry, man, we're going a different direction." Sort of just like out of the blue.
Right. Yeah, I don't keep up with the Foo Fighters that much. Like I dig a couple of Foo Fighters albums, but they're not like a band that I'm super into. And I just saw part of that story. Like I said, I thought it was a bass player. I didn't even put a name to it. I just heard that there was some controversy around how he got let go. But I mean, it sounds like everything worked out okay.
Just fine. Yeah. It's just like I felt like they should have communicated with him directly and sat him down in person, and it wasn't done that way. They should have said, "Hey, you're amazing. And it has nothing to do with your, fitting in the band or any of that. We just want to try something different." And, and if they would have just done that, I think that they could have had a braver face, publicly, both Josh and the band.
So the little bit of the album you've heard, does it sound like anything else they've done before, or is it like its own?
A lot of people the clips, they're comparing it to Color and Shape. They're saying they're kind of going back to that sophomore record. So
cool
sound, which is great. It's one of the best.
That would be more up my alley than that last album they put out.
Right. The last record was, not my cup of tea either. And so I keep hoping like Color and Shape's amazing. I personally, even though I love every record that they put out, I think Wasting Light is maybe like a high point of their career. 2000, it was like 2011 when they recorded with Butch Vig of Nirvana and Smashing Pumpkins fame in Dave's garage. Like he set up and they recorded that entire record to analog. So they did it old school and it just sounds awesome. I just love that record so much.
Yeah, the process of analog, there's not many people doing that anymore, so I don't know that we'll get that. It's just such an endeavor, and there's not even that many people around that still even do it, just because it involves so much of a process for editing and cutting tape and mixing and mastering.
Yes,
but it is cool as hell,
right?
It is really cool.
It was like, well, that's how all those guys in the band came up, being in the studio in the 80s and 90s in bands, and that's just how the records were made. And so they knew how to do it, and obviously Butch knew how to do it. And they were like, you know what, let's have a one last hurrah for analog. It sounds cool and we know how to do this, and it's going to sound different than anything else that's out there. And it was the right record to do it on. And I mean, they had so many cool guests. Paul McCartney was on that record, playing drums actually on that record. And then, I mean, they had a bunch of other like guest vocalists and songs, and it's a great record if you haven't given it a listen. Wasting Light.
I have. It's been a while. Like I said, I don't claim to be the biggest Foo Fighters fan, but I do appreciate their music, and I've listened to a good amount of their discography. Former roommate and best friend / brethren of mine, Griff, is a huge Foo Fighters fan. So even through osmosis, I've heard all of these albums over the years.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's one of those things. But that, you know, I would never claim to be like a fan that would try to have an intelligent conversation about the band in that level of detail.
I should sit down with Griff and geek out on Foo Fighters then.
Yeah, he would for sure be your guy for that.
For sure.
Especially if you're going to talk about like Butch Vig, because he's a huge Butch Vig fan as well, from the recording standpoint, because he went to school to be a recording engineer and has a way higher appreciation for that than I do as well. So you could really nerd out there. But hey, man, you ready to get into this thing?
Let's do it.
All right. So this week we're talking about Carrie, which stop me if I'm wrong, Chris, but this is the first Stephen King novel.
It's the first publication, and interestingly, it almost didn't get published. I'm not sure if you were ever aware of that story, but King was, failing. He was submitting manuscripts, so on and so forth, to, getting little things published in magazines and things, but submitting, full books and just getting turned down. And he had written this manuscript and then maybe a third of it and just gave up on it and just said, nah, it's trash, and threw it away. And his wife, Tabitha, was, walking through the area where he was writing and noticed that there was a lot of paper in the trash, pulled it out of the trash, read it, and said, no, this is really good. Put it back in front of him and said, finish this story. You have something here. Ended up submitting it and got it published, and got, his career wouldn't have begun in the same fashion anyhow, if it weren't for his wife. And he's famously, given her flowers for that, over the years.
Yeah, I've kind of heard that story. I also read that like it was rejected 30 times. Which
he's been
crazy.
Rejected. I don't know that story's been rejected that many times. That could be the case, but I know that he would put a nail in the wall, write, submit, get rejection letters, and put those rejection letters on the nail until the nail was so full of rejection letters that he had to put another nail in the wall. And that was how he was like, this is, I'm not going to give up. I'm just going to keep going. But I'm going to remember, this is how I'm going to remember that, this is happening as I keep going. But it almost broke him. And we have his wife to thank for the fact that Stephen King is, a voice in the world.
Yeah, you kind of get it. It's kind of weird when you talk about this being his first book, because like Blaze was written before Carrie, right? And as far as what I recall.
A bunch of things that he wrote that came out that he had published later after Carrie, he had written before Carrie. So certainly he probably had, who knows, half a dozen or more novels that he was just sitting on because he couldn't get them published. He knew they were good, but nobody wanted to publish them. Yeah,
I know like The Long Walk and Rage were both written, I believe, before Carrie as well, and faced similar rejections. Which seems crazy in retrospect of our show, which we've covered both of those, and now we're talking about probably his most memorable for a lot of people. I mean, this is a fan favorite.
It's certainly top 10 Stephen King, and the fact that it's the one that took him out of anonymity and made him a superstar writer, that that alone should make it worth reading.
So Carrie is the story of a teenage girl raised by a religious fanatic mother. isolated from the world, bullied at school, and terrified of her own body because no one ever told her how it worked, which is pretty much the synopsis at the beginning of the story, leading up to the point where Carrie is an outcast amongst the rest of her high school because she doesn't know these things that most kids would know by of this age because of how sheltered she was. And it starts off pretty quickly with Carrie White getting her first period in a high school locker room and thinking that she's literally dying, like that she's bleeding to death. And the girls around her are laughing and throwing tampons and chanting. It's not just like them being cruel. It's almost like a ritualistic humiliation where the mob is turning against one person. Some real Lord of the Flies type shit here, like turning against Piggy on the island. And it's in that moment that we learn something about Carrie that hasn't really been shown to this full effect yet, and it's that Carrie can move things with her mind. She got X-Men powers. So not super flashy like a X-Men, but not first at all. It's very subtle. She's going through all the stress, and light shatters, a door slams, a pressure valve releases, just enough to let you know that like this rage is kind of building, and it has been building inside of her for a long, long, long time. So that kind of takes us up to the, I don't know, Act 1, if we're going to break it into acts. How did you feel about the beginning of the novel and the beginning of Carrie, I guess the story of Carrie?
Yeah, I mean, the idea is so, I think, perfectly distilled, just being bullied like in high school or in school in general. I didn't get bullied like this in high school. I did actually have some bullying where I got bullied in middle school, so I definitely can relate to it. Maybe not to this degree, but I got picked on when I was in middle school, and so yeah, I mean, it captures a reality that a lot of people probably have been through, and it's interesting. And then to marry that to the idea of somebody who's an outcast and then has powers. I mean, it's like everything's against her, that her mom being this zealot, and like wanting her to kind of keep her in control using the religion. And then the school, like all the kids not understanding, her hardship because of the way she's been raised. And so this is why she is the way she is, and nobody has any empathy for her. And so it's just sort of this like sort of perfect storm of events, that makes this possible.
Yeah, and I mean it plays into similar to Rage, where there's all these other things going on into every character's life, right? That shows what's going on inside of them to some extent. I never was bullied anywhere near close to this extent, but kind of went through the same thing in middle school. Being a comic book fan, wrestling fan, maybe I was doing it to myself a little bit there. And as far as those things used to not be very cool when I was in middle school.
It's so weird because
being a comic book fan, video game fan, wrestling fan, kind of the triple threat of. I'm sorry, you cut out there for a second. What was that?
Oh no, yeah, that's just saying, all these things that are now like kids today would be like, I can't believe, like it'd be so hard for kids today to believe that if you're a fan of comic books, that would be a reason to be persecuted or, made fun of.
I wonder, so I think there's still some truth to that though, because there's a difference between being a fan of like the Marvel movie universe and then still being into comics. Like,
true.
You're showing up with Image Comics in high school. Do you get the same, are you going to get a similar reaction? Anyways, the story is not about me and my middle school hardships. By high school, I'd kind of grown into myself a little bit and played guitar and was in bands and it was in theater and other sports activity stuff. So that kind of went away from me. But like with Carrie and what happens to her specifically in this locker room, nothing ever to that extent. I can't remember anything to that extent even happening to anyone.
Nah, I mean, this is certainly I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, like the kids don't get bullied this badly, but yeah, like certainly not. I can't say that I've ever faced bullying this bad. There are very small isolated incidents where, I've experienced bullying, but they weren't ongoing. And it wasn't like I was an outcast at any point. And that is painful to watch because I mean it's that the indifference, of all these other kids, you have this one sort of alpha that's like the popular kid and everyone else kind of gets in line with them because they don't want to be on the outs, so that it's unfortunate that stuff happens. And this story, even if it is exaggerated in that way, is, it's still, there's a kernel of truth in it.
Yeah, and it boils over in a different way than rage does, right? But with very bad circumstances still. So it's kind of crazy that he wrote those two so close together. It makes you wonder what was going on with Stephen King in high school, or maybe even a friend of his that this could be pulled from. I'm sure he's written things or talked about this in more detail that I'm not aware of, but yeah, it is very on the nose of what is happening here. And the big thing here is we get the what do you call it? It's not having psychic abilities, it's having
telekinesis.
Telekinesis, there we go. Which in 1974 was very, very
it was an idea that wasn't as mainstream. It was like there were books about it, people were aware of the idea, but certainly not in popular storytelling.
Yeah, and a lot of times when you would hear, like when you read about someone having telekinesis books, it's always associated with some kind of like murderer. Because they try to tie it back to Satanism and witchism and all of the isms out there. Like, have you ever noticed that? Like Amityville Horror, the guy that owned that house, they're like, well, he had all these telekinesis books and all of this, right. The dark arts, so to speak. Right. So this was not something you would get a lot in 1974.
I mean, this is like all like boiling up to in the real world to a point that not too many years later, we end up with, the satanic panic in society and, just like this overreaction to ideas like that, that it's like, well, I don't understand it. It's magic. And that comes from the devil, and that whole idea of, that overreaction to something that people don't understand. Just, yeah. Combine that with being an unpopular kid. It's cool because this is like the first Stephen King book, but it also really cements sort of like his style in a way that, I think he understood really quickly, with the response to it, that people really enjoyed this sort of like a bit of the real world and then a bit of this supernatural element sprinkled in makes for a really interesting story. And obviously it's 50 years later, he's got 70 plus books, and a lot of them obviously tied in, this sort of like he builds a world that you believe and then just drops the supernatural into it. And so you believe it.
Yeah. So then the aftermath moving forward here, because we could stay in the weeds on this for quite some time. So basically there's two popular main female characters. One seems to be a little nicer and kind of feels guilty for Carrie. And she seemingly is trying to do something nice, which is convincing her boyfriend to take Carrie to the prom. The other lead, let's just call her lead cheerleader for lack of a better term, lead popular girl, lead mean girl, is furious at this and decides that, kindness is not on the table for Carrie and she wants a big spectacle. So she rigs the prom vote so that Carrie will win. And the prize is, as soon as they will put the crown on Carrie's head, a bucket of pig's blood above the stage will come down. As prom goes on, Carrie, for one night, she seems like she films like a normal high school kid. She's dancing. She's having a great time. She, kind of is looking at the world around her in a different way. Like, everyone doesn't hate me. My mom's wrong. The world's not out to get me. They're not all the devil, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then they crown her prom queen, and the pig blood in the bucket falls, and through her eyes, the crowd is all laughing at her, or almost it doesn't matter. But in her mind, everyone in the entire gymnasium is laughing at her. And all of the years of repression and humiliation and religious terror and isolation, they collapse into a single blind moment of rage for Carrie. And that leads to our third act, which is the destruction and the follow-up confrontation with Carrie's mother, who is really the root of all these problems to some extent. So before we jump into that, do you have anything to say about that section, the prom?
Yeah, I mean, the way that, the book, the way it unfolds in the book as well as in the De Palma film, I think really captures, sort of that, like, somebody who's been repressed, maybe would be the best word, finally able to open up and maybe just be able to feel like they're included for the first time, and it's like letting their guard down. And really, if it weren't for Sue Snell, the cheerleader chick, getting revenge for feeling like, because she got in trouble for, it was really all her fault, for
Yes.
bullying Carrie, but then felt like, she's like, no, I'm not going to take this sitting down. I'm not going to get detention. I'm not going to be expelled without, further harassing her and showing that I'm still the alpha. Anyway, so yeah, that whole thing, just the whole scene in the prom and everything is like, it's like this calm before the storm where you're like, yeah, great. This is awesome for her. She's having what a lot of kids have at prom, which is that magical sort of moment where you're like, kind of becoming an adult to some degree, and
Higher degree for some others that might have gotten a hotel room after prom.
yeah, exactly. But I don't know what, there's something about the prom that's sort of like a rite of passage, I guess, that it should be memorable. It should be one of those things that's like exciting for you. It's a point in your life where, you're doing something that's a little more grown up. You're putting on a tux and or a nice dress, and maybe renting a limo and having a nice dinner, with your date, and going to a nice dance. And it's this thing that it's really, if, as we probably all know this story to some degree, anyone that's been a fan of Stephen King, whether you've read the book or seen the movie, it's just like so just infinitely sad to just watch this last moment of goodness before, it all falls apart.
And speaking of it all falling apart, the gym doors seal, fire spreads, electrical lines snap. In the novel, it doesn't stop there. Carrie walks through town and destruction widens. Gas stations explode, buildings burn. The town fractures under the weight of one girl's psychic collapse. So not only does she turn this gymnasium inside out, it's the entire town, which I think is kind of cooler in the book than in the Brian De Palma film. I love both.
Yeah.
We're going to get into both movies, both the 1976 flick and the 2013 remake here in a bit. But the way it's described in the book, the sheer destruction is like let's go to comics for a little bit here. Very Jean Grey turning into the Phoenix here.
Yes.
In the way that everything is being blown to shit.
Well, it's the rage of, just like everything that her mom was telling her, which wasn't true. And as you can see as the viewer, or the reader, her mom's saying, they're all going to laugh at you, and, you need to stay this small little closed-minded individual like me that is afraid of everything. And she's like, no, Mom, I need to go out into the world and become a person in the world. And then this one act of just maliciousness just ruins it for everyone. It ruins Carrie's life, and then she in turn, with this great power that she has, just wrecks everything, which, you can certainly commiserate, with her anguish, but it's also, really sad.
Yeah, it's very sad in the way that it's built towards, and then you kind of know it's going to happen in the way it's described, and you know that the prom is not going to go well. But then there's this like beautiful section of Carrie kind of being able to be a real high schooler and have a normal life, and it's just taken away in an instance.
Yeah.
And the explosiveness of this anger, this pent up frustration. It's one of the things that Stephen King does so well, and we've talked about it when we've discussed other books in the past. His ability to create a pressure cooker. You know what I mean, with his book and everything going on, where everything is just so pressurized. It's going to explode, and when it does, it's always wonderful. And this is no exception in the way that it is described. So after she blows up the gas stations and buildings are burning and the town's, just falling to pieces, she walks her way home, and her mother is there waiting, convinced that this is divine punishment. And she stabs Carrie. And Carrie stops her mother's heart with her mind. But in the book, Carrie also dies as well. And the book ends, not with a scream, but kind of with documents and reports and aftermath and all of this documentation of this suggestion that Carrie is not the only person that has this kind of ability, that there are others like her that could cause this kind of destruction if pushed the wrong way. So that's where we leave off in the novel. So how did you feel about the end of this book?
You mentioning all of this sort of like the aftermath of the story sort of being told through newspaper articles and letters and what have you. I love that. I love that in storytelling. It's something that I don't know, it's exciting sort of in a way that it's like, as a reader, you just it feels like you're in the world. It's like now you're reading the newspaper after this terrible thing has happened, and you're seeing like sort of the world's reaction to it, and it's interesting. And I enjoyed this story. I've read it a few times. I think it's fantastic, and it's a pretty quick read. He certainly published much longer books, really quickly thereafter. But Carrie is sort of pretty succinct story, as you've just described it. It's pretty easy to sum up the story. You could do it in 2 or 3 minutes. But the conclusion is, I don't know, I feel like he's done it in other stories, but not to this degree. And I just really enjoyed the way that it kind of wrapped up in the book compared to the movies.
Yeah, I would agree with that as far as the overall destruction of the town and the way everything goes down with Carrie's mother, plus the addition of the newspaper articles and the documents, and letting you know that there's others like there. Maybe a little boy named Danny that we'll meet later on down the road.
Or there's a book, more recent book called The Institute, which certainly plays on, like an earlier novel, which also, much like Carrie, Firestarter, so he certainly explores this idea of children with psychic abilities. much more throughout his career. And then a more recent, book that he published plays with that idea of this secret government organization trying to use these kids with these powers to create weapons, which I think is really cool. I mean, just the idea, certainly you look at King and the world he came from, the 60s and everything the CIA was doing with their secret projects, testing people, putting them through these crazy, giving them acid and then seeing how they react, stuff like that. So
all of the LSD. Let's see if they turn into an X-Man.
yeah. Right. Just interesting that this is the art. This is an example of how art imitates life to some degree, is like all these terrible things that were happening and that people knew about, even though it wasn't necessarily like front and center in the news. Is like everyone was aware that the government was doing some shady stuff at that time, and now it's all public knowledge. But yeah, interesting how that ties.
We talk a lot about Stephen King's genius, and I brought up the X-Men earlier, but let's just I'm just going to put this out there. X-Men 1963, man. That's the release of the first X-Men comic. Like, thinking about that during this time period of everything that's going on is wild, right?
You think like how old was Stephen King in that era? He's a teenager, when the X-Men comics were coming out, and so that certainly probably had some of influence on his storytelling for sure.
Yeah, it's just fun to think about, with especially like you're mentioning in the 60s and government testing, and right out of the aftermath of Vietnam and the way the world evolved leading into the 70s, and then this book and Stephen King's writing and some juxtaposition between the X-Men and Carrie. You could make that, especially with telekinesis and things of that nature.
Well, as secret government operations, not that this book has that, but obviously there's a, Firestarter is a good example that comes shortly after in his collection of stories that explores that element of, that certainly was something I assume that he was thinking. He's like, all right, I sort of teased at this idea that other kids or other people in the world have these abilities. So let's write a story about another kid that has this ability, but the government is after them, So interesting.
Well, let's talk about I guess the popularity of the book. It immediately sprung a film. The 1976 film, as we mentioned before, directed by Brian De Palma, starring Sissy Spacek as Carrie and Piper Laurie as her mother, Margaret White. Before we get into just kind of talking about the movie, do you like this movie?
The 76 film, I think, is fantastic. It's certainly something that kind of lives in a time capsule. And I guess what I'm trying to say with that is, you as a viewer in 2026 going and watching the movie, you're like, oh man, I wish the special effects were a little bit more flashy, but it works, in all the ways that it needs to. So
it is very Brian De Palma.
Yes.
In a lot of ways, a
lot of that, like
a lot of color, a lot of split screen cameras, shots zoomed with music.
Yeah, the zoom in on the face, and then the music, and then like you're saying, that's classic Brian De Palma.
Yeah, if you've for some reason watched Scarface and never seen Carrie, and are listening to this with an interest of watching Carrie, you will not be surprised by some of the scenes in this movie looking a very specific way. But that being said, I've always loved this movie. I thought it's wonderful. I can't remember. I'm pretty sure this was in my top 10, right? Of movies. I don't remember where it landed. Go back and listen to that episode. It's in the archive. But yes, it kind of shifts the scale. Like, the destruction is mostly contained to just the prom, The story itself's a little more intimate. The prom massacre is very stylized, which I kind of dig. That is one thing I like about the De Palma film, is that you get all of those things like the split screen stuff that I was talking about, and all of these red lights being bathed everywhere over all of the characters. And other than that, though, the story is pretty much beat for beat the
Yeah,
novel. It's one of the
and
few Stephen King things that actually does that.
that's another thing to think about too, is like the popularity of that novel uh, followed within 2 years with the popularity of the movie being such a big success. You got to think like that in some other, reality where the novel's popular then the movie sucked, maybe Stephen King doesn't retain quite as much sort of momentum, where it's like he was, still to this day is a force, and it's the movies are hit and miss along the way. But yeah, that certainly at the beginning of a career is like, it comes out of the gate swinging for sure.
I'm trying to remember who did the script for Carrie, and I'm gonna look that up real quick, unless you know it offhand.
I don't know who wrote the screenplay for the
Okay, so Stephen King was involved with the script. It was Stephen King and Lawrence D. Cohen. Which I guess that, I mean, the reason I asked is because it's stuck, like I said, beat for beat with the novel. I mean, not everything is there, obviously, but enough for it to be what I would consider anyone who's read Carrie wouldn't be disgusted by. Oh man, I can't believe they left that out. Because
Right.
there's so much there that's just like that's also the book. Like if you've watched the movie and you're thinking about reading this, I would say yes, read it. If for anything, read the prom forward in the novel.
Hmm.
Even if you're not going to read the rest of it, because I think that stuff is actually really, really cool. And they don't do that in either of the movies.
Yeah.
But
Well,
they are beat for beat the same.
yeah, the thing in the 76 film after the prom when she's walking away and then Sue and her boyfriend, famously played by John Travolta, but our Sue's gonna like run Carrie down, and then she just like forces the steering wheel to turn and rolls the car, and in classic movie fashion, the car bursts into flames. And then, of course, in the 2013 version, she does a lot more like CGI. You know, they use a lot more effects, and she sort of tears the car apart with psychic power.
Yeah, and we're gonna get into that one next, because I don't think it works as well as the way it did in the book in the 76 film. Because it's supposed to be like I said, like a pressure cooker being released all at once versus this very aimed. We'll get into it, but yeah, I want to say Spacek, the way Sissy Spacek plays Carrie is incredible in the 76 film. It is a sight to
Yes.
behold. She's absolutely wonderful. And Piper Laurie, I am not the biggest fan of in this. I don't really buy her as the Christian mother.
I mean, she's something. It's sort of an affront. Sadly, it's more common than it should be. But like obviously having a Christian faith, you shouldn't become a zealot, or a extremist. But unfortunately, her mother has become that, and yeah, I get what you're saying. Where the actress maybe over overplays it. I personally liked Julianne Moore's take on it better. And so there's elements of the 2013 film, and I know we're going to talk about it, and your thoughts about that. But there's elements of the 2013 film that I liked better. Not that it's a better film, and because it's not, but that yeah, certainly there's pieces of it. Some of like Julianne Moore's portrayal of Carrie's mom is one of those elements that I like better in the remake.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. Actually, as far as one good takeaway to take away from the 2013 remake, but I mean, God, if Kathy Bates was the mom in this film, it would have been this would have been top tier. This would have been top tier. But yeah, she's okay. It's almost like watching it's almost like recording someone on a stage in the way that she acts in this. Do you know what I mean? It's more like she's doing
you're right.
Theatrical performance.
Overacting.
Versus, yeah. For the character, which it fits. It's fine. It works out okay. It's not the biggest part in the film. I mean, obviously you're following Sissy Spacek, and she's so great that you can look past the flaws of the movie. But it is wonderful. Still a wonderful flick. And yeah, man, let's get into the 2013 remake, which I had the script mostly written, and you're like, hey, we should probably talk about that 2013 remake as well. And I'm like, I remember not liking that. And
I'm sort of in the camp of like, there's things I like about it, and I like that they explored sort of the a modern take, like cyberbullying and with phones and social media and what have you. But that combined with, basically it's just a retelling of the same story, but in modern times, that it worked for me. It's not I'm not going to say it's as good as the book or as the original film, but I personally think it's worth a watch if you're a fan of the story. But yeah, I know that that's not necessarily your take. So
yeah, my take was I felt kind of the same way after watching it the second time. I'm just like, yeah, I don't think this one's for me. So we'll talk about it though. So Kimberly Pierce's remake, as you noted, it updates the way the humiliation takes place. It's filmed, it's uploaded, it's shared. So Carrie's this moment of shame in her life goes viral. So it's not just within the school. It's kind of anyone can see it, right? Which is the modernization of the story of Carrie, which makes sense. I think Chloe, is it Moretz? Chloe Moretz?
Chloe Grace Moretz, yeah.
Plays her. She plays Carrie more self-aware, more deliberate in her control of her powers, so that you get more. It's almost like it's not just built out of this rage where it unleashes. It's she's aware of it. She can kind of control what she's doing, which I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of. Julianne Moore's Margaret White, the mother of Carrie. It feels, as noted, less theatrical, more psychologically abusive, and maybe on like a smaller scale, but more realistic. So as far as that character goes in the 2013 remake, I think they knocked that out of the park. I think it's like way better than the 76 film. The way the prom destruction itself happens, it's a lot of 2013 CGI. And Carrie doesn't feel like the pressure cooker like I was talking about, or like a bomb going off, to more like she's murdering more individuals very strategically with very controlled telekinesis,
Right.
Which I wasn't a super fan of.
That's fair. That's a fair criticism, where it's more interesting to see this like individual that is like has this repressed rage that just and doesn't understand really much of anything, doesn't understand herself, doesn't understand this great power that she has, and then you like you said, put that in a pressure cooker, and then just turn it all the way up and just wait and see what happens. And that's sort of what the book gives us and what the 76 film gives us. And then we get to this 2013 where it's like, well, we got to do something different. That's always, unfortunately, kind of what happens. Not every time, you get book to movie remake or makes like The Long Walk that follows it very closely. And doesn't try to do too much out of its lane, and that works really well. But yeah, I mean, I do totally understand what you're saying. You know, your criticisms are duly noted.
Yeah, I mean, but if you're into one, you can watch any of if you like the book, you can watch either of these films and probably be pleased. By no means is the 2013 a bad movie. It's just one that I would never return to unless you were like, "Hey, Chris, we should talk about it."
Yeah. I think that I'm glad that they made it, because it brought this story for a generation of kids and adults that had already loved the story, but for kids that it helped them to better grasp, what was happening, because it's like, the world had changed, in that 40 or 50 years. So that helps, I think, for a new generation to be able to adopt this as their own.
And there is one more of these, right? That we did not catch somewhere in between.
I think you're right.
Carrie remake,
or it was like a sequel, and I've never seen it, but I know that it exists, and I don't really care. It's like somehow I don't know how they made a sequel. If they're making a sequel of Carrie, I mean, she dies at the end. Sorry, spoiler, guys.
Yeah. So there was a 2002 film as well, just called Carrie, which I have never seen. So sorry if that's someone's favorite Carrie out there and you're listening to this and we're hoping that we would talk about it. We're not going to hit it. We're also not going to be talking about The Rage, which was Carrie 2. I have seen that. That is awful.
Okay, that's what I was thinking of. And again, I haven't seen that or the other remake that you're mentioning there. So yeah, just the two movies in the book for me. That's enough. I know that pretty sure that Mike Flanagan, the director, is got another miniseries, Carrie miniseries coming, which I'm interested, because he's been doing really good work taking Stephen King's stories and turning them into very watchable, whether they be, slightly longer form miniseries or movies. So even though I'm like, the story's been done to death, you don't need to do it again. And then I've heard that he's working on a Mist like mini series as well. I'm like, these are ones that have already been done really well. Why? I feel like it's like pressure from Hollywood to like, those ones work. We want you to do those ones because those ones sell tickets, or
Well, I mean, the ones that seem to maybe they should come down to the basement and talk to your boys about what they should do next.
Well, I know that
we covered a great one last week in Dolan's Cadillac.
Absolutely. And I feel like that story could, there's so many of Stephen King's works, whether they're short stories or books, that haven't gotten a good, proper movie or miniseries that I would like to see versus just another remake of a more popular story like this one.
Yeah, and Dolan's Cadillac did get a film around the same time as this, so because it had the Christian Slater film, which I just remembered, even though we just talked about it. Man, there's a lot of Stephen King is what I'm getting at, and we've already done, like I said, there's 4 Carries in adaptations and a sequel. So The Mist is interesting because it's just the idea of the mist, right? So you could kind of do a lot of various different things like that. It's like Cloverfield, where you can do a lot of different things within that world.
I have hopes that he explores in a way, maybe like from the vantage point of those soldiers, and maybe we see this, what's going on at the facility a little bit, that leads into the mist and what's coming. Since we all know the story, maybe that's the idea. It's like a little different view.
Or it's just the idea of the mist, right? And the story is something new altogether. You could go that route.
Yeah, I mean, I'm good with that. Like, just don't give me exactly the same thing. A lot of people are like, the purists want to see like a beat for beat, and I'm not that person. I want to see good storytelling and take that source material and do, don't wreck it, but do something a little different with it, give us something that we don't already know from the page, and I like it when that happens.
Yeah, I've been spoiled by the monkey. So I want more like that. Less of just here's a story that you guys have seen before. That was pretty good the first time we did it.
Exactly. Yeah, that is that's my hope, for future adaptations of really anything, not just Stephen King stuff, but when I see, oh, this was a book and now it's going to be a movie, I'm like, I mean, sometimes it works. Sometimes just adapting the story to the screen it's the right thing to do. But I'm not one of those people, I guess is the point I'm getting at, is that I don't need it to be a beat for beat, for it to be successful in my mind.
Right. And I mean, there's a lot of Stephen King stories that lend themselves to being having the world explored just by the sheer amount of characters and things that as a reader you might ask yourself, right? So it doesn't have to necessarily be like, well, these are the characters in The Mist, so these are the characters in The Mist is just an example. You could apply this to kind of anything.
Mhm.
For instance, The Watchmen, right? What they did with that TV series, they could have just been like, well, we're going to do a mini series about The Watchmen, and it's going to be kind of like the movie that we did that was 3 hours long, but we're going to split that into a TV miniseries, right? As opposed to what they actually did, which was a lot more interesting. So it's I'm on the same page with you as that. And that kind of takes us to the end here. Bachman score for Carrie, Chris.
This one is definitely, in my top 10, even if it didn't make my top 10 list, and I can't remember what my top 10 list. I feel like we're going to need to revisit top 10s every year because there's just so many good ones. But I'm going to give this a Bachman score of 9 out of 10.
I am also going to give this a 9. I did not put any weight of the 76 film because I will also give that a 9 as well. I really enjoyed rewatching that more so than I thought I would. So we're going to give that a 9. And that's closing us out. So, Chris, if you have any of your socials you want to put out there, go ahead.
Yeah, you can find me on Facebook, Christopher Clawson, and on Instagram, Chris_Clawson 1982. And then, of course, I'll leave it up to you to mention all of our Boink connections as well.
Give me all the wordy stuff. If you want to reach out to me directly, it's Christopher.R.Patton on Facebook and Christopher.R.Patton on Instagram. And that's Patton as in Patton, like the general, in case anyone has. I've heard some people be like, I've been looking for you and couldn't find you, and I finally found you. If it's Ian, that's why. That would be the reasoning. Also, www.boinkstudios.com. You can find all of the content of Boink Studios. 6M podcast that I just recently did, like I said, talking about Princess Bride. That's out there. Ray Sports and Slams. If you like football, basketball, MLB, sports, all that good stuff. Some wrestling, that's there. Tom Clark's Main Event, the go-to for a live wrestling podcast every Friday at 4. You can check that out on Facebook Live, YouTube, all that stuff. And then it also goes up on the normal YouTube channel afterwards. But if you want to be involved in the chat, that's there for you. And also Bear Mode, which is the Bear podcast going over every episode of the Bear. And the Patton Report. Plug my own shtick while I'm at it. Updates coming to the Patton Report. You're going to be getting more video content, some actual gameplay, as well as gaming news, stuff like that. That's in the near future. As I brought up at the beginning of this podcast, one of the first projects is The Warriors for PS2 by Rockstar. That takes us to the end of the show. Carrie isn't about telekinesis. It's about shame taught as doctrine. It's about adolescence framed as sin. It's about what happens when cruelty compounds and no one intervenes. We've talked in the basement about grief that never leaves a man alone, about revenge that takes years to mature, about children forced to grow up too quickly because the dead won't stay quiet. Carrie is different. Carrie is what happens when someone has no language for what's happening to her, no support, no protection, and suddenly has power. She doesn't conquer the world. She doesn't escape. She erupts. That's why the story lasts, not because of the blood, not because of the fire, because everyone understands what it feels like to be laughed at, to be singled out, to be told you're wrong for existing the way you do. Most people just don't get telekinesis with it. This has been Bachman's Basement. Sometimes the monster isn't in the dark. Sometimes it's in the crowd. And sometimes it's the crowd itself.